Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beginner Animals and Other Need to Knows. So this is the first PowerPoint where we're going to introduce animals to you. We are also going to first go over some other need to knows that you guys should start to understand before you start doing animal care. All right. So just so you remember, we are going to work through our animal collection in a order of our ranking system. So we have beginner, novice, intermediate, advanced, and masters. All right, so this is the beginner. Everybody starts here. And then through Bio 181, you guys are going to work your way up this ladder. And some of you are going to get to master sooner than others. It's kind of more of an independent working ladder once we get up that far. So it depends on how often you're in the labs and how far you get with your training. By the end of Bio 181, for you to pass, remember that you're supposed to have pretty much all of the animals trained in your binder up to intermediate. So all beginner, all novice, and all intermediate animals should be checked off in your binder by the time we're done with this semester. Moving on. All right, lights, lights, lights. There are a lot of reptiles in our collection, and lights are incredibly important for their overall welfare. So we have everything from your standard heat bulb, UVA, UVC, full spectrum, tube lights, coil lights, heat emitting ceramic lights. So there's a lot of different things out there. So we're going to have a lab where we learn our lights and go see what animals have what type of lights. So we'll be more hands-on with this a little bit later. But I wanted to introduce you guys to the importance of why there's so many different types of lights and exactly how we need to continue learning about lights so that we can continue to improve our welfare of our reptiles. Before I move on, I do want to point out that little red light bulb, a lot of people love using red light bulbs. And you'll see in one of the next coming slides that visible light for different types of animals are different. Some animals can see more than others. For some reason, we decided that red light animals like reptiles can't see. So we use those at nighttime, and we think it's cool because we can see them and they can't see the light. Well, for most reptiles, that is not true. So if you do use a red light bulb, use it in the day, but don't use it as a nighttime. It's still giving them a type of a part of the spectrum that they can visibly see. So you're still giving them daylight at nighttime, and it's not good for them. So that's just a little side note. All right, moving on. So there's all this stuff out there about reptiles and light, and you're going to hear UVC, UVA, UVB, heat, visible light. So there's a whole lot of stuff out there that you need to decipher and learn about to properly keep reptiles. And there's a lot of folklore husbandry with this. There's a lot of people saying that a lot of different reptiles don't need certain lights. So really dig in, get to understand your animals and understand their life history. I'm going to continue to say that throughout your entire time here. Life history, life history, life history. All right, so long story short, you're going to get the incredibly long version of this in herpetology. If you wish to know more, I'm very happy to talk more about it, but I only have so long for this class. All right, so animals pretty generically use natural daylight, especially our diurnal ones, even our nocturnal ones. People don't normally know a lot of nocturnal animals are what they call crepuscular. So they're actually going to start coming out in the wee hours of the morning or right before at that dusk dawn time. So they're going to get those little snippets of daylight that's left in the day or that's very starting the morning of the day. And they're actually going to end up getting some UV from that. So if you look on this spectrograph here, it shows you the different wavelengths of light, and it's measured in nanometers. So that's what that NM is down there. All right, so we measure light in nanometers. So X-rays, as you can see, 200 nanometers and below. UVC is a wavelength where it is actually much more harmful. So you're not normally going to hear UVC with reptile lights. If you ever hear about sanitizing light bulbs, they're going to be producing UVC light. It's harmful to pretty much any animal or plant. It's going to damage those cells. All right, moving up to UVB. This is the wavelength that can give us sunburn. It also helps give us vitamin D. More on that later. UVA penetrates deeper into our dermis, and it's also important for that full spectrum lighting. So part of what helps heat starts going into that visible light. So long story short, most reptiles, and we're just going to talk about reptiles for the most part right now, all right, are going to use daylight one way or another. If they're naturally going to use it out in the wild, who's to say they don't need it in human care, right? We have to offer proper heat, proper UV levels so that we have happy, healthy animals. All right, let's talk more about UVB. So why is UVB important? So UVB, like I said, is that wavelength that actually gives us our vitamin D as well. Yes, we can get it from dietary supplements. We can also offer these supplements to our reptiles. However, reptiles are very unique. If they don't have this UVB wavelength, proper heating as well, they have to get up to whatever temperature is natural to them. Their bodies can't synthesize the calcium that they ingest. So we can supplement the living daylights out of them, but they're still not going to properly be able to utilize and absorb that calcium unless they have this UVB light in proper temperatures. So we need to make sure that we understand our animals, give them the lighting that they need in order for them to be healthy. So it's not just calcium that it affects. There are plenty of other health-related benefits to having the UVB. Breeding season, circadian rhythms, for just generic light. If you don't have a normal daylight, nighttime light cycle, or you mess it up with something like those red light bulbs, so where they never truly have a nighttime, their circadian rhythm is going to be messed up. That can mess up proper breeding cycles. You can cause hormone imbalances. But one of the biggest things most people do know about, and that's what these images that you're seeing is showing, is metabolic bone disease, or MBD. So if you don't have proper UVB levels, they are going to have issues absorbing that calcium, and their bones or shells, all that stuff is going to not have all the calcium it needs to be strong and form properly. So you end up with curved spines, improperly shaped shells, deformed jaw lines, very weak, brittle bones. They're going to be able to break bones much easier. So very, very important that we understand our lighting. So please, if you want to, do a deep dive into proper UVB lighting. And again, I'm happy to talk to you more about this, but you will learn a lot more about this in herpetology as well. All right, so other heat options. We talked about the actual visible light and why that's important. We also need to get ambient temperatures and basking spots where they need to be for our animals. So we utilize a couple different tools. So heat panels, which is on the left here. These mount normally to the ceiling or to the top of your enclosure in some way. And these are called radiant heat panels. So all they put out is actual just heat. All right. So these are good for creating basking spots along with other light options is how I like to utilize them. But these are going to help heat up your overall enclosure. You can make a hot side and a cool side this way. So you want to have it on one of the spectrums of your enclosure, right? You want to have it on the far left, far right, so that you have a warm side and a cool side. But these are designed to not heat up enough to where it can burn your animal, given they should be high enough to where your animal is not going to be able to actively just touch them and lay on them, just to be on the safe side. All right, always should be attached to a thermostat. That way it can regulate the temperature properly so you don't overheat your animal. On the right, we have heat mats. All right, these are always on the outside of the enclosure. You're either going to have these underneath or on one of your sides of the enclosure attached in some way. You can use heat tape to do so to keep them in place. These are also going to be utilized with a thermostat so you don't accidentally overheat, melt, bust your enclosure. And then both, as well as being on a thermostat, it's going to help them not short out, overheat, or melt. That thermostat should trigger them to turn off if for some reason they do short out. All right, so these are very important. You have to make sure that we set them properly and that we don't overheat, as well as make sure they're plugged in and not accidentally overcooling our animals. All right, and as we get in the labs, you guys will see these in action in our enclosures. Heat monitoring, all right, herpstat or thermostats, talked about those with the heat panels and the heat pads. So here's one in the picture. Very top picture there is a herpstat 6. We have plenty of these on campus. All right, so each one of those numbers, you can see 1 through 6 up there in the picture, is a different enclosure. Each one of those has a temperature probe. We have to set proper temperatures so that the enclosure itself holds where we want it to. It's going to hold that ambient temperature where we want it to. So you're going to use different tools to make sure we keep them at proper heating. All right, so that little yellow thing that looks like a gun, it's called a temperature gun or a heat gun. So you're going to be able to take that, and it has a little laser pointer on it, so you can point it exactly where you want to. You pull that trigger, and it's just a big old thermometer in the shape of a gun, basically. So it's going to tell you what temperature we're reading at. You should always, always, always double check temperatures when you go into work with your animals. Make sure we're not too cold. Make sure we're not overheating. All right, always use your temp gun. It's your best friend. All right, you use the temp gun alongside your herpstat, and you're going to know exactly where your animal is and if you need to move your temperatures around. So always, always, always pick up those temperature guns and get in there. Hot side, cool side, and what the temperature of the actual animal is going to give you a perfect reading of how well they're doing. All right, we do have other ways to monitor it periodically throughout our labs. So there's different types of gauges for temperature and humidity. There's electronic ones and just little manual ones that you can look at too. So whenever they're there, make sure you pay attention to them. All right, other PPE. We have hit snake hooks, which means we're getting close to talking about snakes. All right, so feeding and handling tools. Snake hooks versus field hooks. Want to make sure you guys understand the difference between the two. Some of you are going to go out in the field and want to do some things. So I want you to know that there are things called field hooks out there. So the picture on the right, the two hooks on top that have that L shape or that 90-degree angle on them, those are field hooks. Those are designed to go out and flip rocks, flip big heavy logs. They're reinforced, they're sturdy. All right, the U-shaped are the handling hooks. Those you don't want to utilize to flip rocks and logs, not just because you can damage the shape of the hook, which is strategically designed to fit the curvature of a snake, but they are not reinforced. So you can break your handle and hurt yourself. Dr. Loafman had a friend who actually did this out in the field one day. He was trying to roll a big log and the hook snapped and he ended up kind of impaling himself on it. So use your proper field gear. All right. Handling hooks, not to flip big heavy things. They are handling hooks. They're made to use to handle your snakes. As you can see in that picture, there are a bunch of different hook sizes. So you want to make sure you're using proper sized hooks. We have everything from little baby juvenile hooks, which are super tiny, all the way up to what we call python hooks. They're going to be bigger, sturdier, they are heavier, but the hook itself is wider to distribute that weight so it doesn't hurt their bellies when you do handle them. All right, side note on hooks, you do not always need to use a hook when you handle the snake. They are there if you need them. So I don't want people jumping into using hooks, but I will show you how to use them in class once we get hands-on. All right, snake tongs. So these are a little bit different. We do not openly use these on campus. We have no need to. These are designed to handle snakes. As you can see, there's a bottom platform and a top moving lever. All right, at the other end, there is a handle for your hand with a trigger. So everybody's played with a toy very similar to these little T-Rex heads. You pull the trigger and the T-Rex bites things. Yeah, same idea, right? Except these are made for holding snakes, right? Not very comfortable for the snake when they have something pinching them. So that's why we don't readily use these. Where you do use them, some people can use them as feeding tongs if you need to. So like for our water monitor, this wouldn't be a bad idea to use as feeding tongs. However, we have other different types of tongs that work perfectly for him. But hot snakes, so venomous snakes is what hot snakes mean. So when we went out to Arizona, we went herping on the road looking for rattlesnakes and stuff. So whenever you are handling venomous snakes, this is an idea that is not a bad one. All right. These give you a little bit more control. It's a little more uncomfortable for the snake, but it ensures that the snake is held and you can move it from point A to point B with a little less risk. All right. Moving on to our first species, guys. All right, Pantherophis guttatus. This is the eastern corn snake. All right, so this is for the adults. We're not going to have the babies quite yet, but our adults is what we have for beginner animals. All right, so these guys are native right here in your backyards, all right, southeastern United States. So we do have these, they're more prominent further south in our state, right? They're gonna live in more forested areas, but they've been seen in fields and kind of all over the place. People find them at their houses all the time. All right, so heat, humidity, and diet. So ambient 75 to 85, normal daytime temperatures. They can drop cooler than that, and they do brumate. So they will be able to handle cooler temperatures, but that's more for when they shut down over the winter. All right, basking temperatures, about 95. And then their humidity is just like what we can handle here. So general humidity is 40 to 50%. They can absolutely deal with higher humidity. But on average, it's normally about 40, 50%. All right, diets. These guys can eat a number of different things. We normally feed them rodents like mice. We can on occasion feed them chicks or small quail. So we do tongue feed everything, went over that before, but however, corn snakes, we do house some together. So whenever we do feed, we feed our animals in their enclosures for the most part. Certain ones we may tub feed. If you're housing someone together, we don't want to feed them both in the same enclosure. So make sure you remove somebody. They're going to go into a feeding tub. We'll show you this. You should get trained on this. All right. So you put somebody in a feeding tub, you feed one in the tub, feed one in the enclosure. No one starts trying to eat the other or fights over food. Everybody's safe. So make sure if you house them together, you separate during feeding time. All right. Other random facts. So these guys are kind of like your generic starter snake. So they're very friendly. We have been breeding them here in the last few years. So we have 3 different age groups right now. We have brand new hatchlings this year, we have yearlings, and then we have our adults. As you can see in the picture, and as you will see in our collection, there are many different morphs. So morphs are just different, think of it as dog breeds kind of. So people have bred them to get all different types of genes to show up. So you have creamsicle, caramel, striped, everything all the way down to scaleless. So we are not overly into morphs here at West Liberty, though we do have morphs. Most of them were donated to us. So we normally try to breed our good old standard normal corn snakes. Every once in a while, we do get some morphs that hatch because of the genetics that they have. But yeah, so same species, just different looks for them. All right. And checkered pattern on their belly, whenever you get to see one, is how they got their name. Kind of made people back in the day when they first started identifying these things. Your good old standard maize ear of corn has the same kind of pattern on that they have on their belly. All right, next animal, Pogona viticeps. So that is our central bearded dragon. These guys are native to Australia, brushlands and deserts. All right, so they like it nice and warm. So basking of 110, so nice and toasty. All right, ambient temp should be about 75 to 90 throughout the day, with that hot basking spot being available to them. So again, whenever you have your heat, you want to make sure they have a hot side and a cool side so they can actually regulate their temperature where they want it to be. All right, humidity, they can absolutely handle lower levels down into the 30s. They also do like some humidity, especially when they start to shed. We can bump up their humidity a little bit. All right, lighting for these guys, definitely want full spectrum lighting, UVA, UVB. All right, these guys absolutely known to be able to get metabolic bone disease, MBD, without the proper lighting. They are omnivorous. A lot of people love to feed them greens and veggies and more greens and veggies. However, they are primarily insectivorous. So you want to do a good diet of bugs and then supplement with greens. So that's what we do here. So we do give them greens once or twice a week. And then on a more regular basis, we give them a good variety of bugs. All right, other random facts. So not just bearded dragons, but a lot of different lizards will have these things called femoral pores. So whenever you pick them up, feel free to kind of take a look at them. It's one way to help you sex the lizard. Males will have larger femoral pores than females. A lot of people end up asking me if bearded dragons are actually venomous or poisonous because of the movie Holes. So there's good old Shia LaBeouf. with a little bearded dragon sitting on his shoulder. So no, they totally painted up these bearded dragons and made them very venomous lizards for the movie, but they are not dangerous. If you get bit, you shouldn't get bit by a bearded dragon. All of ours have always been very nice and calm. I've only come across one angry bearded dragon in my life, and that was when I went to the pet store, and I was able to get that thing tamed down in a couple weeks. So should never get bit, but they are not going to kill you if they bite you by any means. All right, another random fact, and you will see this all the time through the labs when you're working with our guy. They can change their beard colors. It's dependent on if they're being defensive, if they're unhappy, if they're in breeding mode. So their beards can actually change colors. The most common one is they will go from the nice light pretty colors that they are to black. And that's normally like a defensive thing. And a lot of times you'll see some head bobbing and some other fun behaviors to go with it. All right, onwards to our blue-tongued skinks. So we have two different species. We have a northern and an Indonesian. All right, so a little bit of differences between the two. So the northern, I will show you further down on the next slide, is native to Australia. The Indonesian is native to Indonesia. All right, if you look at the pictures, your northern tends to have a lot less black on them. Their little stubby legs don't tend to be dark in coloration. Whereas your Indonesian, you have normally darker colored legs, darker complexion, especially on the bottom side of that little body. All right. So the northern, native to Australia. So it's northern Australia. They live in semi-desert, grassland, scrubland areas. They like hiding under brush and down in burrows to get away from the heat of the day or to cover down at night. Indonesians, obviously native to, again, islands of Indonesia. All right, and again, there's arid grasslands, woodlands kind of thing, and they also like hiding under brush and down in burrows. So these guys are both diurnal, so they're going to be out more in the day. They're going to be more active in the mornings and evenings when the temperature is a little more sustainable. So they'll hide under brush and stuff in the day to get out of the heat of the day, and then also at night. All right, temperature range, a little bit different between the two. Or sorry, your temperatures are fine. Your humidity is a little different between the two. All right, so your standard baskings, right around in the 100s. Your ambient overall, you should have between 70 and 95 for them to be able to thermoregulate with. All right, your northern, so your Australian blue-tongued skink, your northern one, 40 to 60% humidity. Indonesian tends to like a little bit higher, so 60 to 80% for him. All right, we have one of each of these for the record. We have both of them are in 305 currently. All right, lighting, they should have full spectrum lighting as well. Both of ours do. They just have tube lights in their enclosure. Diets, these guys are absolutely omnivorous. They have pretty hefty jaws. If you ever look at them, they're pretty stocky little things. And a lot of that sturdiness up top towards their head is some pretty decent jaw muscle. All right, so insects and whole prey items, lots of different variety in the insects. They will absolutely in the wild take advantage of small mammals, reptiles, amphibians if they come across them. So on occasion, we will absolutely feed whole prey parts, small mice chopped up or fuzzy mice, that kind of thing. We also have something called reptilinks, which is a different whole prey option. You guys will see that once we get into lab. All right, fruits, veggies, good variety. Variety is key. And this is the first introduction to a complete diet. All right, so they have a dry pelleted diet. That's what you see in the picture. We use the brand Missouri, but basically it is not as it states. They like to call it a complete diet, but you don't only ever want to feed just these pellets. These pellets just have a lot of different fiber requirements, vitamin and mineral requirements to help keep your animal healthy. So whereas you may not be able to get a lot of those through some of the other foods, this is going to help complete your diet. All right, so it itself is not a complete diet. It is helping you complete the missing links in your diet. We have a lot of different variety of these for our different animals on campus. All right, other facts about the skinks. All right, northerns are readily bred in human care. They're one of the more common skinks that you can get in pet stores, reptile shows, that kind of thing. Indonesians, however, are not as readily bred, so a lot of them are still imported. So still wild caught. So if you ever get super into blue-tongued skinks, get to know your species, ask the breeders if they've actually been bred or if they're wild caught, because helping wild caught continue is not something we want to do, right? A different cool fun fact, they're ovoviparous. All right, so this means that the offspring develop in eggs on the inside of mom, and then they actually hatch inside of mom. So they give what is much more closely to live birth. So that's a pretty cool fact. So they don't dig a burrow, lay eggs, or do anything like that. Mom actually carries them. Right? And yes, they absolutely do have blue tongues. It's a defense mechanism type thing. So when they get scared, they open up that mouth, they put out that big blue tongue. It's a bright, flashy color. It's supposed to help scare off predators and that kind of thing. All right, our common leopard gecko. All right, again, very common animal. Most people have seen them in pet stores. These guys in particular, right? Native in the Asia, Afghanistan, northern India area. All right, dry and semi-desert areas. A lot of people envision these guys in straight up like deserts, walking around just on sand, but they do like more habitat than that. They actually love climbing up into rock crevices, foliage walls, that kind of thing, and hiding in nooks and crannies. So, all right, so these guys are known to be nocturnal or more so crepuscular. So crepuscular is that, again, dusk to dawn time. So heating, they don't necessarily come out and bask in the heat of the day. So I don't have a basking temperature for them, but there are different ranges for daytime and nighttime. All right, so daytime, 75 to 90. And at night, you're gonna drop ever so slightly. Right, humidity, they don't necessarily need a ton, but we always offer a humidity hide so they can go and get that when they need it. All right, so 30, 40% humidity, we can bump it higher, especially when they're shedding. Let's talk about lighting. All right, so there is a lot of information out there that nocturnal animals do not need specialized lighting. It's becoming more prominent that they do. So those crepuscular animals will come out at those dusk to dawn times and will do what is called cryptic basking. Right, so they'll stick out a piece of their tail or a foot or the top of their head into those last little rays of sunlight during the day or those wee hour morning sun rays, and they're going to get some UV from that. All right, so they're going to help get some of that vitamin D and everything to help the processes in their body actually function. So yes, people have absolutely kept them without offering these lights. We offer them because they get them out in the wild, so it's more naturalistic for them. And we have seen our guy use them. All right, diet, these guys are insectivorous, primarily going to eat your bugs. Yes, on occasion, if they come across something small enough to eat and take advantage of it. A lot of people like to feed them pinkies or something like that in human care. So we've done it periodically as an enrichment item, but predominantly insectivorous. Lots of different bugs. They're actually really fun to watch. Our little leopard gecko absolutely will do the fun little cat thing where he sees something moving and he hunts and he wiggles his tail. So they're kind of very cat-like to watch sometimes. Right? Other species facts. So these guys, you can see them get really dull when they go into a shed, but you don't normally find their shed skin. So they actually eat their shed. So it's kind of weird. This picture is this little guy's helping himself shed. They just kind of rip it off their body and they eat it. So that's a predominantly gecko thing. Most geckos will eat their shed. All right. The genus Eublepharis. All right. These guys are different from most other geckos. Most people think of like crested geckos when you think of a gecko, and they do not blink. These guys, however, have movable eyelids. So definitely a little bit different. They also do not have the so-called sticky feet. These guys are not going to be a species that runs up the wall, right? And these guys are better at climbing than you think. As I stated, they love to climb into rocky outcrops and hide. So a lot of times they'll climb into rock outcrops, and that's how they thermoregulate throughout the day. They let the rocks heat up, and they use the temperatures from those rocks to keep to the temperatures that they want to be at. Don't mistake that for them being good at holding on when you're handling them, however. You got to be careful handling these guys because they are not great holding on while you're handling them. So always make sure you're protecting them when you hold them. All right, our first tortoise. All right, Stigmacheles pardalis. That is the leopard tortoise. These guys are native to Africa. All right, Eastern and Southern Africa, different ranges. So they like the dry savanna grassland areas. And they are a very pretty colored tortoise. That's why a lot of people like them. They have very, very pretty colorations, definitely pretty patterns on them. All right, so heating, lighting, humidity. All right, they like it warm. They shouldn't drop really below the 70s. They like it warm. If you start having temperatures too far below 70 on a regular basis, it can start having digestive issues. They can maybe get some respiratory issues. All right, basking of 100, they like it warm. Got to have that basking temperature. So if you ever see our leopard tortoise up under his basking light, get one of those temperature guns. Make sure he's actually getting up to temperature. We might need to swap out some of our bulbs. Always got to double check that. All right, humidity. They can have some lower humidity levels, absolutely 100%. However, in the wild, they do go down into burrows. They don't tend to dig them. They use already pre-made burrows to go down into, and they find humidity. So you can get a lot of shell pyramiding, which you can actually see on our leopard tortoise. He came to us with it, with too low humidity. So we absolutely work on having our humidity. We try to have him have a humid hide with about 70% humidity. Right, lighting, you absolutely need to have that full spectrum lighting, UVA, UVB. If tortoises do not have that, they can also get shell deformities and that metabolic bone disease. They can have soft spots in their shell, so it's definitely not good. Diet, he is strictly herbivorous. All right, greens, different veggies like different squashes, sweet potato, he will absolutely eat. Fruits should be very rare. So these guys are not surrounded by a ton of fruit. Their sweetest fruit might be something like the prickly pear cactus, like you can see in the picture here. They have fruiting bodies and stuff that pop off during the right seasons, and they can eat those, but it's not very prominent in their diet. If you get too much sugar in them, it can cause an imbalance with their gut fauna. It can give them diarrhea and all kinds of other problems. So got to watch the fruit. Make sure you follow the food binder. All right, they get pelleted diet, that complete diet. And you always want to make sure we offer hays and grasses. So we have Timothy hay that we give them, and we also grow our own grasses and clovers and that kind of thing for them to graze on. And then we are currently trying to grow our own succulents. So we're growing, what's it called? Prickly pear cactus. We have it spineless so that you shouldn't get spines in your fingers. Be wary, they still have some spines, but he absolutely loves it. Other species facts, so picture of a couple babies because it showed this great picture of the top of this guy's shell on the top there. So they have what is called a knuckle scoot. So scoots are each different one of those little individual pieces of their shell that you can see. The knuckle is the very top one of those that's normally right behind their head. As you can see in that baby in the top picture, he has like a V cut out. So they don't have that knuckle shield. It allows them to pop their head up, which allows them to be one of the only species of tortoise that can really swim. The other aspect of that helps them is that they actually have developed a very large lung space inside of their shell, of which their lungs are oriented very differently. So their lungs are actually just in the upward part of their shell, meaning like the top, the dome of their shell. So they have that expanded lung space, and then they can lift their head up so they can actually float and swim relatively well as far as tortoises are concerned. So that's pretty rare in tortoises. All right, the other thing is that they're the second largest species of tortoise in Africa. They're second only to the sulcata tortoise. All right, and these guys, turtles and tortoises in general, have something called a bursa sac in their back end, and that's where they can absorb water, and they're going to hold it. And as a defense mechanism, it's going to they can just release this bursa sac and it's going to make it look like they've peed on you. Frogs do this too, but it's a good defense mechanism. Something tries to grab a hold of them and all of a sudden this burst of fluid just pops out of them. So when scared, they absolutely do this. The other thing they'll do is just straight up defecate everywhere. Our leopard tortoise used to be wonderful at this. You used to hold him for an education program and he'd start pooping everywhere. He has since gotten a little bit better. All right, our next tortoise species. These guys are wonderful. We have two of them. They are brothers. All right, these guys are native to Central and South America. So the dry and wet forested areas, grasslands, and savannas. So this is a picture of one roaming about our campus. So our boys are wonderful. I think they're about 12 years old right now. All right, so temperatures and humidity. They like, again, very warm. So ambient 75 to 80, and then their basking can get upwards into the 100s. Again, absolutely have to have that full spectrum lighting. And then humidity, they like a lot of humidity. It's one thing we have to fight with here on campus. We don't have overly humid temperatures or humid areas around here on a regular basis. So always trying to wet down their substrate. We have humidifiers in there with them. We have dry and humid sides to their enclosure. So whenever you're in there, make sure you pay attention to those. All right, diet. So again, these guys are an omnivorous animal as opposed to the leopard gecko, who is strictly a vegetarian. All right, so these guys love their greens and veggies. They also will eat a variety of insects. A lot of tortoises will look for carrion, so like dead animals, they'll maybe chew on bone and the carrion itself and get a little bit of extra protein and calcium that way. And then these guys themselves, the redfoot tortoises, actually are more specialized on fruit than most tortoises. So these guys have an upped amount of fruit that they get. So they eat it on a much more regular basis. They're able to handle that, and they actually kind of bank on having the fruit to get different vitamins and minerals and stuff for themselves. Right. And no, for the record, this baby was not ours. We got ours full grown. All right, other facts about them. All right, males will make noise to attract females. So if you don't know this fact, most tortoises will absolutely make noises. Ours on campus here have croaked a couple different times. It's fun to hear them make noise. You don't hear it on a too regular basis. Normally it's around breeding time, right? When these guys become adults, a lot of tortoises just seem to be very rounded out. These guys actually get a little bit of a waistline. They have an hourglass shape. So it's kind of unique to redfoots. Other random note, they're called red-footed tortoises because those real bright red scales that you've seen on their feet throughout these pictures, our guys definitely have very, very brightened feet when they're not all muddy. And they also get the coloration on their head. It's normally red and yellow. All right, so territorial. They're not normally territorial, a little bit during breeding season. However, our two boys definitely are territorial. I'm not sure why they started doing this, but once we got them from the Roanoke Zoo, they started sparring with each other. So we've had to keep them separated. So if you ever get them out, definitely one at a time or on different sides of the quad, that kind of thing, so they don't end up trying to bite each other. They're very good at sparring. Right, our first amphibian. This is the African bullfrog, also known as the pixie frog. You get that pixie from that Latin name up there. All right, so Pixiphalus edasperus. So they're native to Africa, South and Southeastern Africa. Right, they're going to be found normally around bodies of water. Obviously, amphibians are normally tied to water. These guys are unique. During the dry season, they are going to burrow down, and then they're going to hunker down and stay there until the wet season comes back. So they're actually able to deal with lower water levels. They have that bursa sac. They hold on to water over the season. And then once the rainy season hits again, they're going to reemerge. All right. So temps, they do like it warm. So 75 into the mid 80s. Don't normally offer basking spots with amphibians. They have that permeable skin that we'll talk about in a little bit. So they tend to dry out more. We want to keep more humidity. As stated, these guys can deal with lower levels of humidity, so we'll let his enclosure dry out a little bit and then we'll add humidity back into it. But he should normally stay relatively mildly wet substrate. He has a water dish he can go plop in if he needs to. All right, their diet. There are a lot of very fat, obese pixie frogs out there. Same thing with Pac-Man frogs. All right, their diet should mostly be insects. This is going to help control them becoming obese. Proper frequency of feedings is another thing. You don't have to feed them every single day. All right, they can absolutely get small rodents and reptiles on occasion. I will occasionally feed ours a small mouse, that kind of thing. It's good to give them different calcium levels and that kind of thing. You get that from the bones from those small rodents, but they're also very fat when you feed them. Mice and things, mice have a very high fat content, generically speaking, so you don't want it to be too often. All right, other special facts about these guys. So they do have a tooth-like projection, and in this picture here, you can actually see that on that bottom jaw. They have 3 tooth-like projections. There's 2 on the side, 1 in the middle. So it is not a full-blown tooth. It, however, is definitely sturdy and can hurt when bitten. I have never been bitten by one, but I hear that it is not a great feeling. So it's kind of unique to them, right? Males will absolutely protect those tadpoles. So I gave you a video here. I'm going to try to play it for you. If the sound doesn't come through, I gave you the link. You can just type that link into YouTube and you can watch it. So, but females will lay 3,000 to 4,000 eggs. They'll hatch after 2 days, and your male will stick around and try to make sure that they actually make it into becoming little baby frogs. So let's see if this works. I think we are, okay. Last slide, I do believe. So one other side note about amphibians, they have that permeable skin. So they can absorb, a lot of their moisture that they need through their skin, which also means any kind of chemical that they come in contact with, they're going to absorb through that skin as well. So we always, anytime we go in there, want to make sure we wash our hands. You're going to be wearing gloves anyway, because you're awesome. All right. So you don't want to use latex gloves. Another reason why we don't use latex. They tend to have, there's been shown evidence that it can be a toxicity effect with latex gloves to them. So we use nitrile in the labs. We also do have vinyl if anybody needs them. But you want to go ahead and moisten your gloves as well, just to make sure there's nothing on them. We have treated water for any of our amphibians for you to use either in their enclosure, or we can literally, pour some over your gloves before you handle them. They have moist skin, so you want to make sure that you're not touching them with something really, really dry. It can hurt them. Sweat on your hands, any of the salts and stuff isn't going to feel good to their skin. So always make sure you're doing proper handling techniques. It's going to help them stay more comfortable whenever we do need to handle them. We don't handle them overly often, but when we do, we need to do it the proper way. And then anybody who has water, we want to make sure we treat. We have Novaqua in the labs. We will train you how to do this, but it takes out the chlorine and other heavy metals and everything in the water and makes it safe for them to sit in and drink, absorb, all that fun stuff. All right. So guys, that is the end of our PowerPoint. So beginner animals, it's there. Everything on here is top priority for the quiz. Know your species names. Going to give you that hint right now. So all those Latin names that were up there, I tried to say a lot of them. I know I always miss doing that to some of them, but know those species names. You got to identify a common name with the species name. Get to know those temperature ranges, humidity ranges, some of the fun facts about them, and then all those tools and stuff and lights and everything, all that information in the beginning. Get to know that. Your feeder insects will also be on the beginner animal quiz. So get to know your feeder insects, ask me questions, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, good job, guys.